welcome back to this last segment of the Fourth Estate, and the torch is on us. The Fourth Estate will appreciate your feedback via two channels. One is the NTV Facebook account and the website. Tell us what you feel about the media, and you can also give us feedback. Melina's Twitter account.
Yeah, is
Melina at
Melina Platas, and then the hashtag for this show is hash the Fourth Estate.
Fourth Estate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can give us feedback on what you think about what you think, and we'll be able to share it in subsequent shows. Gentlemen and lady, we're going into an election in 2016. I have two editors in the studio. Chigundu will be deploying because he's the political editor. Chigundu, how do you position yourself? The last time I moved on a van from State House, I found they're providing some lunch and saying, you know, it is the tradition, you have to provide some lunch, because everybody tries to position and create. I have been told of secretariats or desks that work outside of hotel areas, and for them their job is to monitor how they place. If Brad appears on Fourth Estate, they say we placed Brad there to speak our language, even when they didn't do it. They say, you know, Charles hosted this show because we positioned them like this. Chris hosted these people because of things like this. How does the media and individual journalists insulate themselves against some of these things?
You know, Charles, the media is in a very precarious situation in this country. The kind of business that the media carries out is unique in the sense that we are one of the few enterprises that attack our clients, and then we expect
attack or criticize, because Chris had issues with the word attack. How do you use the word attack?
Yes, criticize, but in whatever sense they don't take
frank discussion.
They don't take it nicely, and then we expect them to turn around and give us money to support our businesses. Specifically, I'm talking about government institutions, which are the biggest clients to the media. I mean, if you look at the level of advertising, precisely because the private sector is still very young. So because we're in that situation, I think sometimes we must find a way of working with government and the institutions without necessarily being compromised. You talked about this issue of facilitation. We are going into elections. I know all parties will be angling in trying to get the attention,
the best media,
and the influence of the media. So if in my view, if a political party offered a journalist at our place, or if it offered me, I mean, facilitation in terms of transport, a truck, I don't think, well, personally, I don't think that's a very contentious issue. The basic thing is, as a journalist, you know your role, you know what you're supposed to do. Irrespective of that kind of facilitation, at the end of the day, you have to write a fair and objective.
What do you mean by facilitation? Because it's a word that really chants my intestines. When people talk about facilitation in reference to the media,
you know what is saying?
Facilitation is a broad thing. For example, I use the example of transport. If candidate A is going to facilitate a journalist to go to a certain area where they're going to do a campaign,
you think that is right?
When you look at
Charles, Charles, allow me to come in here.
Asking the editors here.
I'm asking editors. Let it first speak, and then I'll come
back. What
Charles
needs to know, what Idris is saying, in a country where things are done in a daylight manner,
yes,
once you recruit person X, you do a job analysis.
yes.
After doing a job analysis, you do job profiling. What kind of person do I need for this? You recruit the person. When you recruit, you say, these are the terms. But these are the means through which you achieve these terms.
Ideally.
What happens in Uganda, the job is flouted. We have given you a job. First thing, we need the results. No transport, no everything. No. Then, if you look at going to 2016, all media houses in Uganda will be guilty of going in the bed with the government, not just journalists. Because State House will say, we want to move with our press team. They pay a night allowance, they pay lunch, they pay. And journalists are happy. At the end of the day, journalists are happier when they have win on Museveni's convoy than on a lot of Tunis convoy.
Yes, because of
because what comes.
More money.
And the media houses are not refusing to run the stories that come from Museveni's convoy because Museveni paid the journalists.
But see, Chris,
or because if you don't run them, you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. The other thing is, the other thing is, most times we keep saying, journalists, yes, by the way, we admit there are operational challenges in the media. But what I frown at, and I will continue frowning, that The complainants are actually champions of what they are pressing the media does. If the media takes envelopes, I have seen President Museveni give Brown envelopes openly. Some have even called them bribes. Does he still have the credibility to say journalists take bribes?
Facilitation.
When you are doing it openly, to a church leader, to a politician, to cross.
We've heard from the editor.
I have a problem with that one.
Brad.
Yes.
One of the biggest budgets that's going to run, one is in Tanzania, for example, they've been going through, now they're going through a constitutional reform. They're writing a new constitution rather. But in their last election, the ruling party was buying page 1 of newspapers. I've read this in the latest report from CPJ, the attacks on the press, their annual book that they release on attacks on the press. One of the major issues that are being highlighted for East Africa is the media influence, the influence of powerful people and money outside into newsrooms. You're going to have a budget that is going to buy media space. You're going to have a budget that buys all the prime time of radio stations, especially upcountry. You'll find a few. I don't know how much money somebody will have to bring. Chris's show won't be bought. The hot seat won't be bought. Fourth Estate won't be bought. But someone is going to go upcountry and say, I'm booking this block to shut out anyone else who might try to use it. They do that with Kololo Airstrip, a meeting ground. Block out. It's booked from this day for the next 2 weeks. So no one can book during that period. Could come as a church group. They could come as a political organization. They could come as an NGO. How does the country itself insulate itself when there is so much money being distributed? When the budgets, you saw what happened in 2011. There was inflation because there was so much money flooding. How does the media try to stand above this money, both as businesses or as individual journalists?
Charles, for starters, Chris made a point. He said people don't own journalists, but they own media houses, which is true.
Don't own journalists and
Yes, and journalism, but they own media houses, which is true. These media houses are businesses. Businesses that we have to consider and remember that they have to bring returns. Now, the person who invested in this studio that we're seated in this beautiful machinery and all that, has to get his money back. Now, that money comes from advertising. That comes from the space. That comes from that prime time you're talking about. But that prime time is more than likely going to be bought by the person with the money. And in this case, we're talking about government. Now, it is not a crime for them to buy. It is allowed. Me and you were discussing the other day, and I mentioned to you that I find it the most beautiful PR thing that has happened in this time has been the South African elections. They were completely shut out. Very many people did not know that South Africa was even having elections until Zuma was swearing in. Okay? Pictoris was the story that was sold the whole period. Now, that was beautiful. As a PR practitioner, I find that to be the most sensational, the most beautiful thing, because if it had gone to the press, as it should have, you would have seen a lot would have been exposed of the government. But they managed to contain that. But ask yourself, when they were containing that, were these media houses players? Were they part of it? Were they involved? Of course they were. Because you can't say that they were shut down, they were tied, they were refused to express themselves. Okay? The other thing that has
just
the other thing that has been going round in here is you notice that journalism in Uganda is being compromised by the fact that their pay is poor. Okay? Chris mentioned that you are telling this person to be professional, to be passionate about the job, but he's not going to eat passion. Okay? He's not going to run after the bus. He's not going to walk to Kapchora to write this story. And the media houses, the facilitation they're giving is not really what they are supposed to be giving. So if on the Museveni bus, like you mentioned, there's lunch, there's dinner, there is hotel, there is some facilitation to put in your pocket to go back home and buy milk for your kids, it's going to be taken.
There can never be an excuse.
Only a moment. Chikunda, I'll come back to you in a moment. Let me bring in Melina. One of the biggest budgets, President Obama's last 2 campaigns, 2008 and 2012, there was a washout. Huge money. And money is not being spent on buying voters, like happens in some of these other democracies. It is being spent on media. How does the media manage to maintain some middle ground somewhere and still be able to report critically?
Well, I think the money is also spent on what they call get out the vote campaigns. In the US, one of the biggest problems is turnout, which is actually becoming an increasing problem here. The lowest turnout was in the last election, and this is the problem, I think.
34% in the world.
Yeah, and I think the overall was 59% turnout in the 2011 election. So, money is spent on turnout, on getting people to come to the polls. And I think, they also employ, like in the US, for example, they employ tactics that actually mobilize people to recruit other people. I remember on election day, I'm a member of the Democratic Party, and I get so many emails from them, but they had a campaign going on where they would have their supporters call people in critical states. So it was like Ohio, I don't remember the other states, but they would actually give you a
volunteered in Oklahoma.
Yeah, it was based on a volunteer campaign.
So I volunteered in Langston, Oklahoma.
Yeah. So they give you the name and the phone number of someone to call, and you're supposed to call them and say, I'm so and so. I just wanted to remind you to vote today. You don't say vote for Obama or vote for whoever. You just say I'm calling to remind you to vote. So I think thinking about how to move forward and how to make sure that there's some modicum of fairness in the next election. I think it'll take both the side of the media and also the side of political parties, especially opposition political parties, being a little bit more creative in how they make sure that their voice is heard. But I also want to point out something you mentioned, which is that most people across the country during elections are not reading newspapers. They don't read newspapers in general. They're listening to the radio and they're listening to their local radio station. And I think it's probably going to be much harder to manage and control kind of the domination of radio stations, especially when they're owned by politicians, upcountry than in Kampala. We can talk about things that the Monitor could do, or that the Vision could do, or the Observer, whatever it is, training and other things, having these conversations about how to deal with this tricky facilitation issue. But most of the information that people are getting are from local radio stations. And so everything we do here is going to impact a relatively small percentage of the electorate.
See, I'll take it from what she says.
Yes, and you have a minute, and he has a minute.
And when we talk about media, let's avoid the temptation to look at NTV, Monitor. At least we can have opinion here, we can express ourselves here. Media in Uganda is so big and has spread that every dick and harry who has money has a media house. You go to rural areas and you look at your colleagues called journalists. You speak to them, tell them the passion of journalism. We are here for public service. Journalism is a public service. We are like any other public servant, the good of the majority. But when you hear the stories they go through, to get even the news that goes on broadcast, you are tempted not to imagine about their shortcomings. You say, is this Uganda? The problem, Charles, affecting a police officer on the street, a nurse in Mulago, is the same problem affecting the journalist. But we talk like, it is them who are suffering. For us, there
was a magistrate who uses a border to go to...
So, Idris, your question is, Idris says that it should not be an excuse for not to do good journalism. Yes, which I agree. But cheating a journalist is not an excuse.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Because when I'm going to Uchumi, I don't take passion.
I don't want my
it doesn't pay my bill on the team.
I don't want a teacher where my child goes of a school to give my child half-baked notes simply because they're not happy about their pay.
But you have given half-baked salary yourself. So what do you do?
So
you must give the
in the way the media, we must continue agitating for better terms, for better pay. But we must remain professional. We can't run away from that. I mean,
the picture you painted,
what is the professional
painted here is professionalism is very difficult. It's hard to come by.
Nobody says that. Idris, you cannot in your life. You cannot give what you have. If you have a pain in your heart because you are cheated, don't pretend to defend another. You must be. It will be from your heart.
You first remove the stake in your eye.
Speak and do that you think is true in your heart first.
Chris, I'm not talking about journalists. I'm talking about people who
can listen to Melina for a minute.
Doctors, even teachers, even nurses. And I think that's why journalists...
So it's their profession that's being paid well.
Yes, Melina.
Which one? There isn't.
The last thing I wanted to say is I think for all of the challenges that the media faces, there also need to be more strict consequences for people who abuse the media. So in some cases, maybe it's not illegal to buy someone tea or something, but there are definitely you know, blatant, you know, crimes that are being committed, bribery that's being committed, and it's the responsibility of journalists then to report on that. Maybe you'll lose your source.
They can't bribe you when you can't, when you're not hungry.
Yes, but the ones that can't afford. You see that lunch that you keep mentioning, that has been mentioned over and over. Now you see that lunch that has been mentioned over and over would have saved your life. You see, for you who can afford it, tea cannot bribe you. But there is that journalist, like you mentioned, in the rural area, where that tea means a lot.
The better dichotomy that Chris painted here. When you're an editor at The Observer, or even a senior reporter at The Observer, work at The Monitor, at The Independent, at The New Vision, at NTV, the circumstances are different. Brad doesn't buy you lunch because you are hungry. He buys you lunch because you wanted to have a discussion. But for a journalist working for a radio station in Kapchorwa, it makes a difference because it says, I ate this man's lunch. I'm in trouble.
I have to deliver.
And they're rating the
because a journalist for the last 6 months had never eaten a chicken. Yes. Is that a situation you want in this country?
He has not been to Serena before.
There are some sources, Charles, who give you a story today.
Time is out.
In the process of verifying, Charles already paid. There are those.
Gentlemen,
I gave him a story.
Gentlemen and ladies, our time is out. The focus on the fourth estate. We'll continue this debate, and hopefully we'll be able to bring in media owners and more editors to be able to discuss this as we start on the journey, assessing our journey towards 2016, the primaries and the general election, as and when it happens. Have a good evening.